Objections related to price is probably one of the most common roadblocks when you're trying to make sales, and it's the one that makes us doubt ourselves as well. So before I dive into this episode about ways to mitigate them and navigate them, it's really important that we come from the right mindset. We need to understand and accept that we will be outside of some people's budgets. But if you're hearing it a lot, don't be disheartened because it's really valuable information. Firstly, if you're hearing it a lot and you really are questioning whether you've priced yourself at the right point, it's worth analysing where you sit in your market. So when you do this market research, take important nuances into consideration. As an online tutor, my research would look very different to if I was a face-to-face tutor where the local market conditions would matter. And the second thing to remember is that there really is a price point for everyone. So if you're confident with your pricing and you're still hearing that objection, remember that concept that there is a price point for everyone and consider whether you are targeting the right people, which I'll go into more detail into this episode. So there's a lot more to unpack here, so without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome to the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. I'm your host Samantha and I'm so pleased you're here. As an education business owner myself and a former teacher, I understand the nuances that only apply to us. So in this podcast, I share fluff-free, tailored and actionable ideas that you can mould to suit your needs. If you'd like to take this conversation further, please do reach out. I would love to meet you. And finally, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review. That way, you'll be helping me help more people. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy. So you've created offers that you're really excited about. Excited because you get to teach what you're passionate about in a way that you know works. And you get to share it with people who you know would really benefit from what you offer. But before you've even got your first client, you've poured your heart and soul into creating everything, into making it perfect. And you know just how valuable it is. In fact, you might even feel like it's invaluable. You can't put a price point on it, but you know you have to. So after probably some overthinking, you settle on a price that you feel accurately and fairly reflects all the amazing things you have to offer and the results that you know that you can help your students achieve and the impact you'll make. And you start taking it to market and speaking to people. And that's when you start hearing some hesitations. People want to work with you, but they're hesitating to make that investment, which sometimes sounds like, I really want to work with you, but what you're offering is outside of my budget right now. Now, this will come up. And if you've already experienced it, you know I'm right. And if you're new, then just be mentally prepared to hear it. And that preparation is quite important because it's really easy to doubt yourself and worry that you've priced yourself too high, too low. But I'll circle back to what I mentioned at the very start of this episode. Although there are different factors to consider when it comes to pricing yourself, there is also a price point for everyone. So if you've been selling for a while, you'll know that there are many different kinds of objections that come up, and some are really worth paying attention to. For instance, if someone says that they're really not sure if what you're offering is for them, that's really good feedback for you to assess whether they're correct and it really isn't right for them, or if it is right for them, but you need to think about how you're actually communicating what you offer. But the objection that probably shakes us up the most is the price objection. And it comes up even more when you offer something that's at the higher end of the price scale. So let's dive into what you can do to mitigate it so that you can reduce the chances of hearing it and what you can do to navigate the situation when it happens. So in no particular order, the first thing to do when you hear you're outside of my budget is to really understand and identify where they're coming from. Are you really outside of their budget, or is what you're offering not enough of a priority for them right now? In some cases, if people really want it, they'll find the money to invest. I will caveat that with there being genuine situations where someone just can't. But I know this has been true for me many times, where I've initially thought that something was outside of my budget, but I really wanted it, so I made it happen. I remember wanting to work with a coach. She was charging £3,000. Now, initially, I really couldn't see how I could just rustle up that money instantly to invest. But when I thought about it, I realised that I could borrow money from my savings and just pay myself back, rather than paying her in instalments that would end up costing me more. So that's what I did, because I knew just how much her coaching would help me. But would I borrow money from my savings to have a haircut or to buy a handbag? No, because they simply don't mean as much to me. So to try and avoid the objection from coming up, or to deal with it when it does, here are the two big questions you need to ask yourself. Number one is, have you aligned your messaging with your client's needs? And number two, are you speaking to your real target client? Now, both of these rely on you knowing your overall audience base really well. Knowing things like common questions they ask, their expectations and their needs. And you can do that by building your audience and interacting with them and getting to know them in other places. So let's say you do a lot of this digitally. You might get to know them better through encouraging interaction on your social media profiles. You might also understand them better by being in online communities with them. And when it comes to a specific potential client, that's your opportunity to speak to them and really hear them. The example I often use is what happens when you go to see your doctor. You don't walk through the door welcomed by a quick suggestion of what medication they have for you today. Instead, they ask you very specific questions, they check your symptoms, and then they make a recommendation based on those. So in a similar way, you want to triage your customers based on their specific needs, so you can recommend what you offer in a way that really aligns with them. And this is one really big step towards avoiding them objecting because of price, because they're actually seeing the value first. So when it comes to things like marketing, you can use your understanding of your audience coupled with your definition of who your ideal customer is, and you can marry the two together through your content. If you're in my business membership, the Tutors Mastermind, head over to the Training Vault, go to the category called Content Strategies Browsers to Buyers, and check out the training session on using content to position yourself as a go-to. To make life easier, I'll pop the link in the show notes. But whether you're in the mastermind or not, it's really important to connect with the people through your messaging, whether it's in a meeting or whether it's through things like social media content or email marketing. Because that way, when they actually get in touch with you or when they're making a buying decision, price isn't what will pop into their minds first. Like with me and that business coach, they'll think about how much they want to work with you, and they will take more of a solutions-based approach. They'll work out how they can make it happen, how they can invest if the money isn't readily available or if they're a bit worried about it. And that really leads me to my second point, which is being aware that sometimes it just takes time for people to truly understand the value of what you offer or to feel confident to invest. Some people that I work with now, they first got in contact with me over a year ago. Sometimes they come close to investing and then they change their minds. Sometimes they come back later. The point is, no matter how much you give people the confidence to buy, the timing simply may not be right now. And there can be so many reasons for it. Maybe they recently invested in some support and didn't have a great experience, so they're feeling a bit shaky. Maybe it's their first time investing in support and they're just not feeling confident. Maybe they're not sure of how much of a priority what you offer is for them right now. But here's what's important to remember. Either way, just because that's how they feel right now doesn't mean that's how they'll always feel. It has been proved to me time and time again. People change their minds, circumstances change. People sometimes just need a little bit more time before they can confidently make a decision. So think about what you're offering people before they buy from you or as they go through the buying decision. So think about what you're offering people before they buy from you or as they're going through the buying decision. This podcast is a really useful tool for me. It gives people a try before they buy, so to speak, as my episodes are value driven. People know that if this is what I'm offering for free, then the value is only increased when they invest in working with me. And when I meet someone who's hesitating, I direct them to specific episodes in the podcast. So I combine building that trust through free training with my first point of understanding exactly what they need and offering them very targeted material. So here's your key takeaway from this point. Think about what you can have in place that you can give people plenty of opportunity to get to know you, benefit from your expertise, and get excited before they actually get to the point of buying. That way, they can arrive to the buying decision filled with confidence and excitement, not hesitation. And if they're still hesitating, how can you keep them in your world so that you're front of mind when they are ready? There are so many ways to do this. You just need a connected set of steps, and a good way to map it out is through something like a flowchart that covers different scenarios. So as I mentioned earlier, trust is a factor that's very important, but so is making sure that your future customer is clear on the value of what you offer and what that will bring to their lives, what problems it will solve. And if they don't get it, that's okay. They may not get it now, but they might get it later. So it's important not to take their hesitation personally. If someone says you're too expensive, it doesn't mean that you are. It may well mean that they just aren't ready to invest yet, and or they aren't the right client for you. Now, I'll just step aside for one moment here. You do need proof of concept, which is where you have evidence that your price isn't actually the issue here. And that usually comes in the form of you having existing clients, because if one person is willing to invest in you, then more people will as well. But if you're at those beginning stages, you can get proof of concept from around you. If other people are successfully doing things the way you do it at similar price point, then you know there are clients for you. You know there's a demand. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is how hesitations are usually quite layered. Someone might express one hesitation, but sitting behind that might actually be a different source of hesitation, and that could be a different reason. For instance, I was speaking to a potential tutee's parent who wanted me to help their child prepare for some 11 plus entrance exams. We had a really nice chat, everything seemed to go well, until she said that she wasn't sure if she could afford me right now. So I said that was no problem at all, but I also asked what was making her hesitate. I asked why. Don't be afraid of that. She explained that contrary to our call, where she seemed very driven to get started and, start the entrance exam journey, they were actually a step behind. They weren't sure if their daughter would be able to cope with the rigour, and they had no idea what her current level was. So it turned out that her hesitation, although she said it was related to money, it actually wasn't. She didn't feel confident to invest because she was uncertain of whether they wanted to embark on this journey. So I responded to that. I suggested my assessment lesson instead, where I could give them honest and detailed feedback, and based on that, they could decide how to proceed. The interesting thing here is that she jumped at it. She took the assessment lesson, even though it was more expensive than my lessons, which, by the way, I wasn't asking her to make any kind of long-term commitment for. So it turned out she was willing to pay more because it was more aligned with exactly what she needed. So the moral of the story here is that instead of focusing on making a sale or seeing the process as a binary yes or no, think about whether you can find out more so that you can respond to it. I'll give you another example that might trigger an idea for you. I've had a few people who have wanted to join the Tutors Mastermind, but they worried that they don't have time to commit to watching past training and or attending the live training every month. So in response, I started creating personalised roadmaps where I select the exact training sessions they should watch and in which order. Immediately, it removes the hesitation to invest. I've had so many people join since I've been doing that, because they had this structured plan which helped them visualize how they could get started, how they could slot this into their diary and make a commitment. So it really is important to find out people's specific needs and see if you can respond to them. That 11 plus client of mine who I work with now started off being hesitant about embarking on the journey. So she needed a bit of a warm-up, something that would make it less intimidating, make it less of a commitment, and where she could come from a confident perspective. Even though the assessment lesson was more expensive, she still went for that. So it really highlighted to me that in many cases, People will make space in their budget for something that really fits with what they need right now. And in those examples that I have given you from my experience, there are some practical things you can do as well. The concept that's underpinning these ideas is to ask yourself, how can I make someone feel safe to invest? So your solution could come in the form of some kind of risk-free trial. It could be a payment plan, a refund policy. Think about what would make sense in your situation. So in my situation, I don't have refund policies because when someone joins the Tutors Mastermind, they instantly have access to everything in one go. So in the absence of having this refund policy, I mitigate that by giving people flexibility. They can pay monthly and cancel anytime. With tuition, I also don't have a refund policy that kicks in if someone tries a lesson and then decides it isn't for them. Instead, I mitigate that to make them feel safe by making sure I don't force them into a long-term commitment. To start with, they can just try a couple of lessons and pay weekly. Now that works for what I offer. It works for me and it works for my clients. You need to take that decision and take a view of what would work for you. So I'm going to leave it there because I've included a few different things that you can think about, navigate, and some ideas you can try. I really hope you've walked away with some ideas and, most importantly, a sense of how to empower yourself when it comes to thinking strategically, instead of seeing you're outside of my budget as a resounding no. I also hope that it helps you with not taking it too personally and helps you be more analytical when you're thinking or when you're hearing that objection, or just when you're thinking about pricing in general. So thank you as always for spending your time with me. You will hear from me on Wednesday, and if you have a quick moment, please don't forget to leave a review. If you're watching on YouTube, then do subscribe to my channel and pop any comments below this video so that I can hear from you and say hello. Would you like to take this discussion further? Perhaps you have some questions or you'd like more ideas on tailoring your business. If so, book a free discovery call through the link in the show notes.